So the cancer you survived, beat, what do you want to call it?
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Cancer's off my radar. I didn't even think about it. I didn't accept conventional... I had radiation.
You had what cancer?
Breast cancer, a large tumor. Mm-hmm. So I just refused chemotherapy, which was what was controversial at that time, because even 10 years ago, it just didn't make sense to me. I wrote this book because November of this year, a year ago, I don't know what happened to me. I actually think I was poisoned, but I had no way to prove it. I was in a bar, and there were a lot of pharmaceutical salesmen in the bar. Mm-hmm. There was a sales conference at the hotel where I was the whole week.
Sounds like a real party.
Yeah, real party. They're good drinkers.
Salesmen.
They're good drink. They got big expense accounts.
You're down at Club Roofie. So
right. So anyway, because I write these health books, I do a lot of testing because I'm curious about how healthy can you stay. How can you make aging aspirational rather than something we dread? Because I'm really feeling great. And I had my immune system tested. And the way you do it is you do a blood test for your natural killer cells, NK. And so the blood test comes back, and my doctor here in Los Angeles goes, wow, you're at 43. And I said, I have no frame of reference. He said, well, usually people your age, it's around 2 or 3. Every once in a while we see a 10. He said, you're at 43. I said, okay, all the vitamins, all the crap I take, and the juices I drink, and I eat as though my life depends on it.
Right.
When I got cancer, that's what I decided I would do. Obviously, it's what I'm eating and not sleeping and stress. So I'm going to change my life, and I have. So I'm in this bar, and I have one glass of Merlot, and I have a salad. Other people in my group have Merlot, not everybody, but a couple, and 3 or 4 salads.
Right.
I leave the restaurant, and as I get to the threshold of the door...
That's a rough group you travel with, by the way, the Merlot and salad group.
Right.
Sounds like some pretty tough hombres there. Would not want to mess with that table.
Don't. Yeah, or I'll call you.
Yeah. Oh, no. Don't make me think to call you.
So I walk out of the restaurant, and all of a sudden the room starts spinning, and I become freezing cold, and I break out. By the time I get up to my room, I got a rash everywhere. My hands are swollen. My feet are swollen. And I can't breathe. I'm really having trouble breathing. And I don't know what's wrong. And we flew home. And all through the plane, all the way home from Florida to L.A., I was freezing cold, just freezing, and really struggling to breathe. And when we got home, I went to the emergency room. And I got there. And when I got there, I was in anaphylactic shock. And I know I had a breath left, if that. They saved my life. With pharmaceuticals, they saved my life. Benadryl, bang into my one arm, and Decadron in the other as a steroid, and Albuterol and oxygen. And they work really fast, and they make you feel safe. So they got me breathing, got me on oxygen. They said, we have to do a CAT scan. I didn't want it because of the radiation, but something's wrong.
Right.
So I go in, I have the CAT scan. I come back, they put me on more oxygen. I'm lying there still trying to breathe like that, and the doctor walks in with the nurse, and they close the door. Having been through this before, I know when they close the door, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like the air sucked out of the room.
Yeah.
He said,
I've had that with program directors, by the way. Close the door.
Close the door, yes,
good
right.
Christ,
right.
no.
It's the,
it's gonna be
the principal in Catholic school, same thing. Close the door.
It's never a good thing.
Right. It's not a good thing. So he looks at me and he says, I have very bad news. This is November, a year ago. What? He said, you have a large mass on your lung. It looks like the cancer is metastasized into your liver. Your liver is so enlarged it's covering your entire abdomen. You have so many tumors in your chest, we can't count them. They all have masses in them. And you have a blood clot, and you have pneumonia. So we're going to check you into the hospital because the blood clot will kill you first.
And we don't validate.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Right.
This is a year ago.
Right.
Okay.
So I get upstairs, and now this nightmare begins. I'm all IV'd up, and my heart started pounding so hard. I said, what I'm most afraid of right now is having a heart attack. I can't believe what's happening to my heart. So they put me on a sedative. I got a sedative. I've got heparin for the blood clot. I've got Levaquin for the pneumonia, oxygen, more Albuterol. I'm so upset. I can't believe it. And the oncologist walks in, who has the bedside manner of a moose, and he says, he's got his arms, he goes, you got cancer. He said, it's everywhere. I've never seen so much cancer.
Wow.
And I'm staring at him. And he said, so what we can do is we can start you on chemotherapy today, And I looked at him, I said, just so you know where I'm coming from, I would rather die. And he said, well, I think you ought to start thinking about getting your things in order. For 6 days, 6 doctors, this is reconfirmed by every doctor. The little weasel oncologist keeps coming in and, it's not good, it's everywhere. And on the 6th day, they decide to do a biopsy. They cut open my neck, they take a piece of my lung, they take a piece of one of the so-called tumors, and when I wake up in intensive care, they say, wow, you don't have any cancer anywhere. Now, if I had been a different kind of patient, what if I had taken that chemotherapy? And during the time that I was in there, I said one thing, because I am really now, after 6 days, 6 doctors, I am a positive person, but, by day 3, I looked at my husband and I said, and I know, if I have cancer throughout my body, I got only a couple of weeks. There's not much time.
How could they have misdiagnosed it that grossly?
Right. How often is this happening?
Well, it's a good point.
But what I held on to, even as I'm starting to think about who gets what. My son, is a grown man, started crying, and I can't imagine a world without you. And I find myself, I can't say it's all going to be okay for the first time, sort of affectionately pushing him away, thinking, you got to get ready for a life. I'm not going to be here. And it was heavy and sad. But I had one thing I was holding on to, and I said to my husband, I've been keeping this file on these doctors who are curing cancer, for the most part without drugs. If I can get out of here, I want you to take me to one of them. And that was what I held on to as hope. So when it turned out to be a misdiagnosis, it took me about 2 months to emotionally recover. I really, when you think you're going to die, you go into the inside body, the cells go, well, we're dying? Okay, that's without emotion.
Right.
And my body started to shut down my emotions, the sadness that got in me, and I'm not a sad person. So when I recovered emotionally, I started calling these doctors that I'd been keeping a file on. I was blown away. And then I said, all well and good for you to tell me this, but I got to talk to your patients. I started interviewing the patients. These are people with stage 4, stage 3, terrible brain tumors like the fellow who was in here before.
Brian, yeah.
I go to Dr. Brzezinski. I go down to his clinic. I see what this guy is doing. Brzezinski escaped the Iron Curtain in Poland 30 years ago because they wanted to eliminate the thinkers. And he got out with $50 in his slides. He had identified that people with cancer are missing a certain peptide, an amino acid in their liver that controls cell multiplication. If you stop cell multiplication, you stop cancer. So he's devoted his life to replicating that peptide, that amino acid. He puts it back in people, usually in capsule form, every once in a while in port form, depending on the virulence, and their cancer is going away. Now this is in compliance. He's just finished phase 2 clinical trials in compliance with the FDA. He's been approved for phase 3.
Is this all forms of cancer?
All forms.
Because it's all about cell multiplication?
Right. His 60% success rate is with brain tumors, the worst kind. Glioblastoma, medulloblastoma, astrocytoma, all these terrible cancers. But I interviewed a little girl at his clinic 3 months ago at 2.5. She had lung cancer that had metastasized into her liver. And her doctors at that time said, just take her home and enjoy what's left.
Right.
Instead, her parents took her to Houston to Brzezinski. She was too little for capsules, so he put a port in her and made a little backpack and slowly administered the peptides for 2 years. No side effects, no sickness, no losing hair, no nausea, no nothing. And I interviewed her 3 months ago. She's 9 years old. She was all fidgety. She was bored with the interview, wanted to go out and play. I would look at this kid and I thought, you should be dead.
Right.
So what I just realized I had to write this book, and having been in that situation now twice, all I've ever been offered is surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and then harsh aftercare drugs. No one ever said to me, if that doesn't appeal to you, there's always X. I wanted to write the book about X.
Let me ask you this. People talk about the life before cancer to prevent cancer. Don't smoke and stay away from the carcinogens and the foods, and the fatty foods and blah, blah, blah. And I always thought that all the sort of cancer as it pertained to your diet was all sort of pre-cancer, but that made sense to me. That, okay, you eat a salad instead of a steak, and you have a you have a carrot instead of a cigarette, that all makes sense to me. But then once you get cancer, the carrot's not going to save you now. That's the way I looked at it. I mean, that's the way I guess just intuitively I thought of it. But this, you're saying, sort of transcends diet and health. This gets into experimental forms of medication and things like that are not, for lack of a better term, endorsed by the man. The big pharmaceutical and that sort of thing.
The FDA tried to put Brzezinski in jail for 300 years for having the audacity to be having these cures. And he fought the U.S. government and won.
It's a conspiracy in your mind.
I don't think there's people in the back room, greedy. But it's a $200 billion a year business. And like when I was on Larry King recently, the head of the American Cancer Society was on as an opposing doc, and another doctor from here was on, and then I brought two of my doctors on who are having amazing success.
Right.
So the ACS guy, who, by the way, I Googled because I want to know who's going to be coming after me. I saw in 70%, I saw 90%. Most of the money that goes to the American Cancer Society is used for marketing to raise more money. The rest is for overhead, really cushy lifestyles. The CEO gets almost $1 million a year salary. So, it kind of colors a little for me.
Sure.
So conspiracy, I don't know. It's just business. It's kind of screwed. But he said to me, we're making great strides, and I worry, Suzanne, that because you people won't get the treatment they need. And I said, is it what they need? For all the billions of dollars that has been raised by well-meaning people who march, black tie fundraisers where probably you've performed and I've performed to raise money for these cancer events. All those billions, they say it's even in the trillions. Where's the cure? Where is the cure? The chemo keeps hospitals afloat. It keeps doctors afloat. It puts an extra $100,000 into the private doctors' coffers, and that's a minimum. I don't care about the money they're making. I'm happy that, business is business. I'm a businesswoman. But as I said to these two doctors, if you say that you're extending life, which means 1 to 4 months of a horrible quality of life, if I tell my readers when they're diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, ask your doctor if this chemo you're going to give me will cure me, and the answer is no, it's not. It's not, unless you have testicular like Lance or childhood leukemia or lymphomas, including non-Hodgkin's. They're having success with chemo with those three. After that, it's zip. I said to these doctors, why won't you listen to these doctors I'm presenting to you who are having success? Why won't you go to Houston and look at this clinic? Why won't you look at the nutritional program that Dr. Gonzalez is doing in New York? Because you're saying after you have cancer, the carrot's not going to help. I said to Dr. Gonzalez in New York, who doesn't use any drugs at all, he said, if you give cancer what it wants, it'll leave you alone. I said, what does it want? He said, it wants nutrition, and it wants a detox body. I said, so what's your protocol? And you can laugh at his protocol, but his protocol is...
Enemas, and more enemas.
Yeah, detoxing, gallbladder, drinking... olive oil, taking pancreatic enzymes to give the enzymes. Enzymes are like little Pac-Men that eat cancer, so they have to take like 150 a day for the first few weeks and eat organic food.
So your cancer, your breast cancer, 10 years ago was beat without chemo or radiation?
No, I took radiation, and the only trouble that I have in my life is as a result of radiation. I wouldn't do radiation today, but that's me, and I'm not giving anybody an advice by saying that.
More of your emphasis is on chemo than it is on radiation in terms of you'd rather people steer away from the chemo, but the radiation you're saying is marginally better, or you might need it, or has a place in this?
Let's talk. I wouldn't have radiation again.
Right. But you did do it for the breast
cancer. But I did do it. And
you've been cancer-free, except for that one weird scare a year ago, for 10 years.
Right.